to my little corner on the internet. Today I'm gonna be talking about 9 books that kind of changed my life. Is a bit dramatic, but these 9 books have made a very intense impact on me as a person and as a reader, as a thinker, whichever way you want to put it. I just love talking about these books so much. And so I thought I would share and provide some recommendations in case you're similar to me. A disclaimer before I get into any of this. I think it's important to note that taste in books and how we interpret books is so completely subjective. So books that may have made a big impact on me may not mean anything to you at all. You know what I mean? So keep that in mind. As you can see, I have written and annotated these books. The first book is Virginia Woolf's The Waves. I read this back in 2020, I think. It was kind of around the time when I just started getting back into reading. This probably kick-started my love for sort of character-led narratives. This book follows the perspectives of 6 different friends living their lives parallel to each other, and it kind of follows this chronological timeline of all their different perspectives. This whole book is essentially just a stream of consciousness of all these different people and all these different lives and personalities and perspectives. And I thought it's so beautifully written, it's so poetic. Virginia Woolf is just amazing at writing prose and writing in depth about emotion. No matter how close-knit you may be with someone and how similar your lives may be, another person's perspective is always so completely unique to them. And I think it was also just a beautiful exploration of friendship and growing up and developing emotions and feelings and intimacy, and I think it was just beautiful. Anyways, the next book I want to discuss is The Book of Goose by Young Lee. When I tell you I cried quite a lot, this is very heavily annotated. It follows the main character Agnes, who kind of tells her life story and recounts a lot of her past with her best friend who has sadly passed away. A lot of this book dives into, I guess, the intricacy and the depth and the sort of intensity of emotional connection you have with a female friend, like female to female, woman to woman, girl to girl. It's kind of, I wouldn't say existentialist in any way, but it's very emotionally intense and reflective. I really loved this book, and I think if you enjoyed Elena Ferrante's Neapolitan Quartet, and if you enjoy reading a lot about female friendship and all of that, yes. When I read the opening line to this, I was like, wow, that is how you open a book. Hello? You cannot cut an apple with an apple. You cannot cut an orange with an orange. You can, if you have a knife, cut an apple or an orange, or slice open the underbelly of a fish, or if your hands are steady enough and the blade is sharp enough, sever an umbilical cord. The next book is not an unexpected one, but it is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. The internet knows how much I love this book. I've read this book 3 times, okay? Am I gonna read it again? Probably. Do I own 3 different copies? Yes, I do. And what about it? Will I buy more? Maybe. Who knows? I want to collect like beautiful, like the old vintage ones. Oh. Anyways, the more times you read this, the more you pick up on details. And I think Tartt has this great ability for very meticulous and intense detail, and she has a way and oh my god. But it follows this very exclusive small class of Greek students at this college, and it opens up with the murder of one of their classmates, Bunny. Rest in peace. And it kind of, the story slowly unravels the sort of insaneness of how this came to be. I think the book does a very great job at criticizing the sort of pretentiousness of academia and the rich, and it's so well done. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to reveal and spoil things. It's so well written, and again, the opening line in the prologue is just chef's kiss. Like, I have it ingrained in my brain, and I'm the bitch who drops quotes from this book casually, you know. And I think also there's so much studying that you can do in the background of this, and there's so much nuance to every character, and it's just like, oh. Next book. The next book I want to discuss is Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. After I read this book, I became a huge fan of Ishiguro's work. Never did I ever think that I would cry over a robot. Essentially, it follows this dystopian universe where this whole concept of artificial friends, which are these lifelike, humanly and very lifelike dolls that are robots, and they're supposed to act like an artificial friend. Clara is one of the robots, and we follow the entire lifespan of this robot through her perspective. And the book serves as like a great sort of exploration of human sentience, consciousness, emotion. Can we truly replicate the human soul through artificial intelligence? Towards the end, when that little twist happened, oh girl, ooh, that one hit me, because it also, there are sub-genres, subtopics, sub-themes of motherhood and daughter, like mother-daughter relationships, motherhood. It's very easy to digest, but there's still so much subtext throughout this book, and I thought it was great. It was a great dystopian novel. When I read this, in my head I was like, why are people still reading 1984 in school when they could be putting this out and engaging students with like more philosophical questions? Like, we know the government is watching us, like, get over it. Anyways, I love that book so much. The next book that I want to discuss is Pure Color by Shayla Heti. This book hit home for me when I read this. This follows basically the entire cycle, life and death of the protagonist that's written from her perspective. It's written in a very abstract and poetic way. It's a very deconstructed gaze on life and, I guess, recounting one's life. It has themes of grief, relationships, identity, friendship. It really is about the entirety of one's life, but through a very deconstructed, abstract lens. This kind of opened up the gates for me to sort of start thinking about my own life in a sort of more nuanced, abstract way, because I think in the past I would view things very literally, and I didn't have the tendency to reflect a lot. This book put me into a space where I started to view things in a much less exact way, in a much less literal way. I love poetry, and I've just loved to start, I guess, viewing myself and viewing my life and writing about my life and journaling from, I guess, a sort of external point of view, viewing myself. And this book kind of started it all for me, and I did cry a lot because it gets a bit sad. Switched gears in the way that I think, personally. Next book is also not an unexpected book that I'll be talking about, but that's Normal People by Sally Rooney. Of course, I've read the Holy Trinity. I've read this book twice. I read Beautiful World War Artie twice. I am going to the intermezzo release night at midnight at this independent bookstore tonight. I love Sally Rooney. I love her. And as I mentioned before, I have a great affinity for books that are very character driven, that have kind of no plot, just vibes, and it just is about life and the human experience. And this book follows Connell and Marianne, and they're sort of intertwining lives throughout this extensive timeline since high school all the way to adulthood. I related a lot to both Connell and Marianne in various different ways, but the way that Rooney writes about the human condition and intimacy, and she writes in such a realistic way. The sort of intricacies and the messiness of being a person, I feel like a lot of the time, sometimes characters can seem very calculated in novels, but she writes in such a realistic way that she's not afraid to show the sort of flaws of characters. And this is genuinely just about normal people, which is why I think there was so much appeal about this book. And of course, one of my favorite quotes that have kind of stuck with me is when Connell tells Marianne, "I'm not particularly a religious person, but I do feel that sometimes God made you for me." Oh, it's just so good. Makes me feel less alone, I feel like, at times when I find books with characters that seem very authentic and realistic and characters that I can see myself in. It makes me, like, even if I'm just alone at home, like, I feel like I have a friend, which is, you know, I have the habit of hugging my books as well. If a character is really sad and if like I'm really feeling it through them, like I will hug the book as if I'm hugging the character, you know? I don't know if that's normal, but I do that. Next is the first nonfiction book. It's the first and the only, really, kind of. Oh, that's debatable, actually. And that's the Fran Lebowitz Reader by Fran Lebowitz. When I tell you I love my girl Fran Lebowitz, I love Pretend It's a City on Netflix, which is basically the TV adaptation of these books. And this book is her two novels combine Metropolitan Life and Social Studies, which were released back 70s, I want to say. It's essentially a collection of essays, and, you know, just by the titles of the two different books, she kind of inquires and kind of dives into the sort of different nuances of social life, pop culture, life in New York, art, all of this. And she's so witty, she's so clever, she's humorous, she's just great at writing, and she has her own like solid perspectives that's so enjoyable to read. I think for both, whether you're a New York citizen or if you're someone who's been to New York, if you want to visit New York, she writes in such a realistic way about things. She's just so good, and this was just such a fun read for me, and it kind of set off my desire to read essays and get into more nonfiction and reading more about life and pop culture from more of a investigative point of view. Is that even a word? Investigative. Investigative. I think that's how you say it. Yeah, probably. If you don't feel like reading the book, watch Pretend It's a City. It's a great show as well. If you want something, I guess, semi-intellectual but still digestible, this is great. This is great. Second last book, y'all, and that is, of course, The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Once I read it, I was like, oh wow! Oh, I understand. Miss Sylvia, I understand you. First of all, I do very obviously recognize that she was kind of like a horrible racist a lot of the time for no reason at all, really. But that doesn't negate the fact that I recognize her sort of amazing ability to write about women's experience, emotions, and all of that. It's semi-autobiographical, which is why I was saying it is fiction, but it's also kind of non-fiction in a way. This follows Esther, and it kind of follows her life through her perspective, and she's entering college life, and she writes a lot about the dynamics of her relationship with other women, with horrible men, and I guess the blooming desire to be so much and to accomplish so much as a young woman. The fig tree analogy kind of set me off into this existential crisis of like, wow, I want to be so much and I want to do so much, but I feel like I want to do everything. I want to do everything. And I quite literally have the fig tree analogy memorized. I have that quote memorized in my brain, and I think about it all the time. It's such a melancholic perspective on life of a growing woman and her identity, and how every experience you have has some sort of very specific impact on you. But no matter how minor the thing is, it can impact you so deeply. And it's a beautiful book. I did in fact see my life branching out before me like the green fig tree in the story, and from the tip of every branch a wonderful future beckoned and winked. So yeah, it's a beautiful book, and I have this wonderful illustrated copy of it. I love this book so much. If you're a very emotional person like me and you enjoy like journaling and writing a lot about life, and you want something that's kind of sad, this is good. The last book that I want to mention is one that I read more recently this year, The Idiot by Elif Batuman. Again, this is yet another very character-driven book where it's no plot, just vibes. It again follows the life of Selin. She's entering college, and if you like a campus book, if you want to read a campus novel, I of course recommend The Secret History, and also this, if you want something that's more contemporary and a bit less insane, this is fun. I saw so much of myself reflected in Selin, and it kind of got me in this position where it made me realize that I am not the only person who is entering their adulthood who's completely lost and doesn't really know what they're doing, and who's just trying to get through every day and be content with life. And this book again delves a lot into college life, getting into relationships, reflecting on identity. I think it touches a lot on imposter syndrome, which is something that I kind of deal with. You know, this whole idea of having these passions and semi-recognizing that you have a talent for something but feeling like it's never gonna be good enough and always putting yourself down. I don't know, I really appreciated this book, and I felt very seen through Selin's character. It's quite humorous a lot of the time as well, but it's just so fun. I love this book. It was really great. We're just like the same. We're the same. Those were the 9 books that I deeply, deeply cherish. These 9 are my holy grails. I hope that I've sparked an interest in any of these books for you and that you go ahead and read it. Thank you so much for watching this. If you've stuck around for the entire video, have a beautiful, gorgeous day.